It's prepared. Okay. What's that? We got this going. Okay. Get this recording going. Okay. I think we're all set. It looks a little light, but they've been coming in late. Sorry. Anyway, my name's John Mudd. I'm with the Midtown South Community Council, and welcome everybody. I'm the chair of this meeting. And let's see, I'll pop up the agenda so we can all take a look. We have a nice agenda rolling in. We have Stacy Torres speaking about her book, Growing Old and Urban American. And Caitlin's going to do a discussion about social housing. Rob's here to talk about his adventures, and Alex has got a couple of notes to tell us. And we have Katie here. I think we'll be speaking about COPA. So it's a full agenda, and I won't delay too much here. But we just a couple of notes. Our farming is project is blowing up. Last 4 weekends, we've been bringing down lots of food. Our Paradise Farm has been growing, producing a lot of greens and so forth. I've been going up there on Saturday, cutting on Monday, bringing the food down coming down on Sunday, cutting on Sunday, bringing it down, fresh greens. We last weekend we got not only from our Paradise Farm, we got a load from back home farm. So we had lots of vegetables, all kinds of vegetables. And we've been going to the public housing area because we've been working really hard to coalesce folks, to help them out. Basically, we're supporting the tenants there, supporting the tenant leader. We're all getting together as a team. We're fighting to keep this seniors from being pushed out of their housing. They're already started to send them letters about them vacating. We're coalescing a legal team. We have a GoFundMe page. If you didn't notice it on the newsletter that I sent out, we can put that in the chat, right, Caitlin? And we have that, right? And
I have a
that's really,
question.
go ahead.
What's the third farm? Because I know you have three farm initiatives, but back home paradise, and what's the third one?
Our Midtown, 53rd Street, or Midtown
Oh,
Court. Yeah, the
okay.
very first one.
All right.
Um, it's small but it produces a little bit. This year we're having a little difficulty because of the construction. They put a scaffolding right through two of our beds. And we had construction out front, and we were planning on doing a tabling to sell produce, and then we take the overflows from the farmers, what they don't sell, and we distribute that. Um, so no. No policy meeting. That's been on hold, and I think we're going to use that space for housing discussions. How to create a community-led plan. We've been talking about that amongst ourselves on the side with a few folks. Um, let's see. Anybody have any updates?
What part are we on right now?
Uh,
Special.
Updates? Yeah,
Okay.
and I think Alex, you have something to tell us. Let me just kind of drop this little screen,
Oh,
and we'll give you the floor. Uh,
um, yeah. So remember that bill called the stock transfer tax bill? Um, it got a co-sponsor, somebody named Crystal Peoples-Stokes, and she is the Assembly Majority Leader. So, when people think of the legislature's majority leader, they automatically think of Andrea Stewart Cousins because she's in the upper house. So she's the majority leader of the state Senate. But lo and behold, the assembly also has a majority leader named Crystal Peoples-Stokes, and she is in Buffalo, and she co-sponsored the STT bill, and we view that as a positive because certain assembly members who might be scared of Carl Hastie can go through Crystal, and hopefully the bill will have better chances because of her co-sponsoring. And the other update is on Honda. You guys might remember that bill from, I guess, 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, a pandemic era bill, which became law. And according to one journalist, the first large scale Honda project is now open and will accept its first low income tenants, 800 of them, 813 to be exact, near JFK Airport. And surprisingly, my landlord is the developer. And I was shocked when I saw that. The architect was the architect who redid my lobby in 2020. And there's not going to be, it's not going to be near transportation, but the residents will have shuttle service, which was part of the planning process. And I would say for those of you who worked on Honda 4 years ago, this news is meant to just give you a little bit of a positive mental boost that your efforts did result in something good. And that's really it.
Thank you, Alex. We'll go to Rob, and then Caitlin and then we'll go to Stacy. And by that time, uh, Katie should be here to talk about COPA. And at the end of the meeting, we're going to make some phone calls and encourage our legislators to pass the COPA bill. So whoever wants to stay on to help with that, it would be really appreciated. With that, Rob, thanks for being here. We're happy to have you.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. And good morning, everybody. My name is Rob Robinson. I'm a longtime consultant with a human rights organization called Partners for Dignity and Rights. I also teach a course in urbanism at the New School. And for those who don't know me well, I spent 2.5 years homeless on the streets of Miami and 10 months in a New York City homeless shelter. So homelessness and housing are issues I care a lot about that are near and dear to me. So on June 3rd, myself, as a person with lived experience, and folks from across the country with the same experience, got on a Zoom call with the UN Special Rapporteur, Balakrishnan Rajagopal, and he's the rapporteur on the right to adequate housing, and staff of the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights in Geneva, and explained that ever since the decision on Grants Pass versus Johnson case, that there's been an uptick, a substantial uptick in actions against homeless people, especially those who are living rough or living street homeless across the country. And the rapporteur wanted to know a lot more about it, as did his staff. And they organized this call for us to get direct input. Also on that call, I need to point out, was Helen Cruz, who's one of the plaintiffs in the actual Johnson versus Grants Pass case. So it was a very powerful call to hear how this is playing out across the country. It ended up with us getting a letter from two rapporteurs who combined their forces together. So Balakrishnan Rajagopal, the rapporteur on housing, and Oliver De Schutter, the rapporteur on extreme poverty, got together, and based on the potential cuts to HUD and other programs that affect low income and fixed income people, really wrote a harshly worded letter to the United States government asking for an explanation of these cuts. I will post a letter in the chat. There were 5 main questions that came out of that, which I will also post, which they're asking for a response. It was a little bit difficult. Not difficult. We know that our federal government, as currently constructed, does not respect international policy and the way folks work in the international community. So it was a little bit difficult to get a response from the federal government, although the letter asked for a response. We did, however, get a response from House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. who organized a meeting to meet with these two rapporteurs. So the rapporteurs are going to get to express their displeasure with those two officers, but I want to post in the chat the questions that were answered, and sometimes these will get mumbled, so I'm going to put them in one by one in the chat so that they're not garbled together and people can very clearly say what the rapporteurs are asking is tell us what the results of these changes are going to be. Have you gone into detail to tell us? And, you know, obviously the government hasn't responded. So there's one of the questions. I will post all five in the chat along with the letter. I have to search through my mail to get the letter. The bottom line is they're asking the federal government for a response. I think this is a perfect organizing tool. You probably want to look at the five questions because the letter is a 9-page document. They really did their work. And I want to thank the National Low Income Housing Coalition and the National Alliance to End Homelessness, who both put out two very strong reports explaining what these cuts and the impact that these cuts would have. And the rapporteurs in the Office of the High Commissioner ripped that report apart and really came up with these questions, which are some tough questions to the federal government. So I think we have an organizing tool as we move forward that we all need to grab and constantly. I use some militant language when I talk, but I mean what I say. We need to push it in front of elected officials and make them understand that the rest of the world is watching. I will add to that, it is important for us at this time because the United States may not respond to a peer review, which is supposed to happen in November. The Universal Periodic Review, which is a chance for countries around the world to do a peer review of the United States. The United States is supposed to get reviewed in November, and the government was supposed to release a report on the 4th, which was yesterday. And so far, we haven't seen it. So we think they may not even respond to this peer review. So it's going to be up to us as communities to sort of push the rest of the world to sort of spotlight this issue and sort of challenge the United States. So I'll stop there. It's a lot of information. I know not everybody works in the international community, but I think this was important because we got folks like the Southern Poverty Law Center to respond and distribute it. We got the National Homeless Law Center to distribute this letter, and it's something that I think is important for all of us to use in our organizing. John, I don't know if you want me to take any questions, if folks have questions. But
sure, yeah.
I'm here if folks have questions about the issue.
Any questions? Rob, I noticed you sent a letter too about Michelle Carver. Any response from that?
Part of the dismantling of the government has now dismantled the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, which we've had a great reaction to in New York. Michelle Carver, who was our representative for our region, would constantly come to New York to have conversations and meet with people on the ground, as long as also with government members. And the government now has disbanded that. I think what we also need to keep in mind, the president can do all these executive orders that he wants, but this is not the law, even though Congress is not challenging him because it's mostly Republicans. If by any chance we get a different representative in the White House at the next election, a lot of these executive orders are going to be undone. So, you know, it might have some damaging effect on the way, but they're going to be undone if we get the right person in the White House in the future.
And with this letter and the community is kind of being outspoken, and what do you see? Tell us what you see that we can do as a coalition.
I think just use it in your organizing, right? Constantly make people aware of this letter. It's a tool in your toolbox, right? Every time you get in front of an elected official, drop the letter in front of them. Because don't forget, the United States is supposed to undergo a peer review in November, and they may not do it, right? And I think what is happening now is countries around the world are coalescing against two forces, the US and Israel. You know, some folks have given a deadline to say, if you don't start to feed the Palestinian people and allow humanitarian aid to get in there, we're going to recognize Palestine as a state. That's going to the U.S. in a different direction. And right now, France has already done it. England is lining up, and so is Canada. So those are three big countries, and I have a feeling other countries are going to follow suit if those three move forward, right? Because you're going to get people taking sides against the U.S. and Israel. So it could get complicated, but I think this is all part of our organizing as we move forward, and we just constantly have to keep as many tools in our toolbox as possible.
Took long enough for some of those folks to come across the aisle, huh?
Yeah. I don't know if they will. Part of our organizing is these town halls, which are happening around the country, which I think is a positive way for people to push back, right? A lot of them are Republican town halls, and people are voicing their displeasure. So we need to, and I'm proposing that we challenge Mike Johnson to either set up a town hall in New York so we could rip them a new ass, for lack of a better way to say it, or really organize our communities to push back on them. But we need to, just don't think that Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand are going to change things. You have to get inside of Mike Johnson's ear, right? And if we can organize people around the country to push back on him, he's going to feel the weight. So we have to organize. That's the bottom line.
Anyone with questions?
I just want to say I so appreciate your perspective, Rob, because I'm just thinking about how the kind of global financialization of housing and the ways in which global capitalism works, and so it's so so here we are in this one in New York, but to kind of think about this wider world and to kind of hold that as not just thinking of it as this kind of abstract spanning the globe of capital, but actually the ways in which we are really important kind of node in this struggle to reclaim our land and our health and our well-being. So I think it's essential that we're always talking and holding that wider perspective. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Before everybody got on the call, I talked about a Brazilian militant who was here from the landless workers movement. And I always use the Brazilian Constitution in a context when I talk about land and transnational corporations. The Brazilian Constitution, written in 1985, post-dictatorship, says land has to serve a social purpose or function. What a novel idea, growing food or housing people, as opposed to our 250-year-old Constitution that values property rights over people's rights, right? So I think it goes all the way back there, but I think as long as we need to connect with organizations around the world. I've always been one for internationalism and trying to promote it. Right now, I'm writing a foreword for a book for La Paz, which is their housing movement in Spain, putting out a book, and I'm writing the foreword. And I think they talk a lot about what they call vulture funds, right? Capital from around the world and how it affects people in Barcelona or other Spanish cities. But it's the same thing with the MST or Mabi in Brazil, another group that I work with. That capital is affecting our lives in negative ways, and we need to understand capitalism. One more thing before I get off, which I found interesting on that June 3rd call. Balakrishnan Rajagopal questioned, and he sort of challenged me because he knew I was from New York, to say, Rob, I don't hear a lot of these, and this is before the primary. A lot of these people running for mayor really talking about a housing and homelessness plan. I think you guys really need to organize and demand that they come out with a platform. And that included Mandani. So we need to think going forward, what is your clear platform to change how we approach housing and homelessness in this country, right? Affordability is a great buzzword, but it's more than affordability. What is your fundamental change that you're going to make with respect to housing and homelessness? So I'll stop there, and thank you for the time, John. And folks, my email I'll put in the chat. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me by email. And good to see an old buddy, Katie. Welcome, Katie.
That's a really good point. Mamdani I saw a proposal, I haven't read it. I just was wondering how detailed it is, and we should probably get on that and read that And
Well, he's put out more information than the others, but it's still not, as deep as
it's
it should be,
frustrating.
right?
Yeah. So you've read it and analyzed it a little bit? Cool. You went mute, Rob. You hit mute by accident. I can't hear you, Rob.
Trying to do the right thing. Yeah, I've read it. I think it needs to go a lot deeper than it goes. I'll just leave it at that. We don't have to dissect it here.
Yeah.
I have
But
him. I'll pass it.
maybe we should set some time aside on a next meeting and do just that though. That might be
Absolutely.
interesting. Okay, let's do that. I'll put that on the agenda for next month. Thanks, Rob. Thanks so much. And let me just remove your pen. Okay, so Caitlin, uh, you have a presentation. You're going to talk about some social housing, and we appreciate your insights. Caitlin, take it away.
So actually, Stacy's going to go first.
Oh, I'm sorry. You did say, yeah. I'm so sorry, Stacy.
No worries. Let me just, I'm not the most tech savvy, so let me just make sure I share the screen and don't, disappear myself from the meeting. Okay, so we have that. We have this. Let me put this in slideshow mode. Okay. Can people see this? Is this
Yes.
working? Okay,
Mhm.
great. So I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can to 25 minutes because I usually do like a 45-minute version of this. So if I'm speeding through and you have questions after, please feel free to, get them in after or contact me. I'm so excited to speak to all of you. I've gotten to know some of you in the last month as we've been working to save Fulton, Elliott, Chelsea houses. So thank you so much for inviting me. I focus on older adults in my research, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But the title of my talk today is about aging in place and how older adults make a home in the city. In my day job, I'm an assistant professor of sociology at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm in the nursing school, but I'm not a nurse. I'm a sociologist. And so, why don't I start with just telling you a little bit about me and a little bit about the project? I always think about my career in research as that lyric from the Talking Heads song, once in a lifetime. Like, how did I get here? So I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Chelsea. From a working class background, I was the first person in my family to go to college. So I already felt like something of an outsider, always very shy, socially awkward, on the fringes, looking in. I'm the daughter of an immigrant from Chile. Who worked as an elevator operator and a mother who worked as a secretary. So nobody in my family went to college. And it took me a little while to see how their gifts came together in my work as a sociology, as an ethnographer who spends a lot of time with people. And so, growing up in the city, there's no shortage of interesting things to look at. My father would come home and entertain us with stories of what he saw during his, day when he was a doorman and he was an elevator operator, actually at London Terrace. And my mother was a diligent note taker and record keeper and journal writer. I also have a humanities and literature background. And so in college at Fordham University, I majored in comparative literature. And after I went on to pursue an unfortunately very expensive MFA at Columbia University, and I studied nonfiction creative writing. And so hopefully this book is a bit readable. I tried to kind of, I don't know if it spice it up, but there are some epigraphs of poetry, and I tried to kind of really bring out people's humanity in the book as I told their stories. And so, how I found my subjects, or rather, how they found me, I never planned to study older people. I mean, I often joked, kind of with a gallows sense of humor, that people in my family usually died early. I didn't know that many older people. My mom passed away when she was 52. So, I always had a lot of early loss. But what fascinated me at first, when I started to do this research, was actually the place where my study began. And it was a little mom and pop bakery that had somehow survived gentrification. And as a lifelong New Yorker, I was shocked when the bakery, which I give the pseudonym La Marjolaine, was still in business. It had been around since 1962 or so, so ancient by New York standards. It was a dinosaur. And this place, which was almost frozen in amber, sat nestled among three residential swaths, public housing projects, low equity co-ops built in the 60s, and market rate apartment buildings that still housed a sizable handful of rent controlled and rent stabilized tenants. And this little bakery where people would gather had 8 tables arranged in a rectangle. So people could dip in and out of a number of conversations happening simultaneously around them. The butter colored walls and the worn plastic tablecloths lent this cozy, if slightly distressed ambiance. And people dropped in several times a week, sometimes multiple times a day, if you didn't even buy anything. But soon I noticed that the place was not only old, but it was filled with older New Yorkers. So men and women over the age of 60, largely in their 70s, 80s, even 90s, and they were aging in place, which is a phrase that gerontologists like to use a lot to describe how, unlike their counterparts who maybe had retired to Florida or whose health declined to the point where they had to move into an assisted living facility or a nursing home, these New Yorkers were attempting and managing to remain in their homes and communities for as long as possible. And many had lived in the neighborhood several decades, and in some cases, their entire lives. So from this site, I recruited the older adults that I'd spend the next 5 years with, conducting participant observations at this location and other places scattered throughout the neighborhood when this bakery, their gathering spot or their cheers, if you remember that old sitcom, closed due to losing its lease. And the older people there had to gather somewhere else and find other places to go. I'll give you a sneak peek into that last day at the bakery by reading a short passage from the opening pages. So maybe this will whet your appetite for reading. And I do like this quotation that I used as an epigraph, and I fought very hard for because the legal people didn't want me to keep it, but I managed to, from Joan Didion, who writes, "A place belongs forever to whoever claims it hardest, remembers it most obsessively, wrenches it from itself, shapes it, renders it, loves it so radically that he remakes it in his own image." We huddled at a corner table on the final day at La Marjolaine Patisserie, a mom and pop bakery on Manhattan's West Side. As snow curtained the windows and icy February air tore through each time the door opened, heavy flakes fell and a little more of the place disappeared. A depleted stock of cakes and baked goods greeted customers. Sooty edges demarcated the ghostly outlines of pastry display cases that had sat for years on otherwise bright white floor tile. The butter-colored walls stood bare but for a leftover Valentine's Day wreath, cradling two fuzzy teddy bears beneath a banner that read, "I love you." With a mischievous glint in his eyes, the owner said that he would leave it for the landlord. He had lost his lease after the landlord had sought a much higher monthly rent, and renewal negotiations had broken down that autumn. But despite everything, he hadn't lost his sense of humor about the fight to keep his store open. Buyers for the equipment stripped the kitchen clean, and burly men soon arrived to remove commercial mixers and industrial ovens. Weighing over 1,000 pounds, they had been planted in the same spot for decades. I felt a twinge of disbelief as movers dismantled a place almost frozen in time, which until a few days before had seemed as enduring as the hulking trunk of a giant redwood tree or the base of the Empire State Building. Under ordinary circumstances, most people probably would have stayed home. Snowy sludge slicked the sidewalks, and many elder customers couldn't risk a fall. But neither snow nor rain nor gloom of night kept most regulars away on the bakery's last day of business. I saw many familiar faces, people I had met since becoming a customer 6 years before. Eugene sat in the corner, though he'd proven stalwart on numerous occasions and had recently recovered from a second major hip surgery. His appearance still surprised me. Another longtime customer, Carmen, turned up despite a bad cold. "I had to come for the last day," she said, brushing snow from her shoulders and shaking off her black hat encrusted with ice. Red-nosed and sniffling, she clutched a balled-up tissue. Rather than trudge 2.5 blocks home, she took a cab back. Sylvia appeared at her usual time, around 10 a.m., and Lucy followed in the early afternoon. So this book really does focus on older adults aging in place in a Manhattan neighborhood in New York City. And to try to preserve the research participants' confidentiality, I don't identify the location, but I'm sure many of you will recognize features of this area with many throughout the city. I try to understand how they maintain independence in the face of accumulated loss, people and their social networks, gentrification, health setbacks, depression, financial struggles, and everyday challenges. But despite all of that loss, they also show resilience in building social support and finding ways to belong to place and to belong to others, including family, friends, neighbors, and everyone in between. And so today I've organized my remarks around the sometimes counterintuitive ways that people made a home in the city. And as we make our homes in the city, there's some like major construction happening on the sidewalk outside. So if you hear some of that, I apologize. Sounds like they're tearing up the sidewalk. I don't know what they're doing. Guiding questions for today and my book, which investigates these questions, are the following. So we know that belonging matters for older adults and really for all of us, but less about how, why, and what facilitates it. How do older people maintain their independence when faced with multiple vulnerabilities? What forms of social relationships exist for them, and how do they create or resist belonging? And in what ways does belonging to a place or a group help people manage crises and everyday challenges? And in this book, I argue that we should devote greater attention to the neighborhood context where informal social bonds blossom. And I argue that they're especially important for older adults, given their need not to overstress their family networks, assuming that they have them, and many don't, and surplus time for those who have had the privilege of retiring. So they really need to find ways to create new habits and routines. And they're spending more time close to home. So this is really critical too, to understand how they facilitate that connection to place. I also argue that relationships in public places, libraries, community centers, park benches, coffee shops, may allow older people greater standing and recognition as something other than dependent or invisible or a problem to solve. And I found in this book over time, while people were grateful for spaces that served older people, or they went to the doctor's offices a lot, they didn't always feel recognized in those spaces. And so alternative social ties stand alongside, and in some cases rival, other structures that are critical to well-being in old age, such as family and home. So isolation is often portrayed as a problem of old age, and this is due to risk factors such as living alone, physical illness, depression can all increase isolation risk. As people get older, their social networks may shrink in later life due to loss of people die, people move away, but also selective paring down. People may kind of like a rose bush or something, cut away the dead branches. And so their circles may constrict in that way. And also shifts like moving to a retirement community or an assisted living facility or transitioning to retirement can diminish work contacts. So sometimes people are finding that their networks are a little bit sparser. But despite these challenges, researchers have also found that the prevalence of isolation among the old remains unclear, and that older people also face less loneliness and isolation than previously thought, and that social interaction and volunteering increase with age. But place is really critical, and place can rise in significance as older people spend more time close to home due to retirement, dwindling finances, and health problems that limit travel. Extensive travel, or even leaving the neighborhood may be difficult, as I found in my research. Even going across town to a medical appointment could be challenging. And as older people become less entrenched in institutions of work and family, maybe they had children and they've grown and moved away, or maybe they never had children, they need to find ways to craft new routines and relationships. And third places, so bookstores, coffee shops, recreation centers, park benches, they offer really important places to socialize. And one of the few opportunities for social contact outside of settings where they receive, services such as a doctor's office or a senior center. And so for people who are vulnerable in a way in which they lack strong family support, limited financial resources, maybe they're having to deal with cognitive and physical declines, I found that these neighborhood spaces really served as important locations outside of the four walls of someone's apartment to alleviate isolation they may have experienced in other parts of their lives. And so just a quick overview of the study. So I spent 5 years with these older adults doing participant observation. So I was hanging out with them a lot. I did sit down with 25 of them to do interviews. And the sample, their sort of demographic characteristics of this roughly 47 strong group. They were more men than women, which we expect later in the life course. Over the age of 60, as I said, mostly in their 70s and 80s. They were Puerto Rican, Jewish, ethnic white, so Italian, Greek, and Irish American, and low to middle income, reflecting the neighborhood demographics prior to gentrification. And so there's another aspect of the neighborhood that I would like to point out. And as you can see from this map, which is a little bit old at this point, but shows a lot of these complexes throughout the city, they lived in buildings defined as a naturally occurring retirement community. And this basically means that, there was a concentration of older adults in this area in buildings which weren't necessarily set aside for senior housing, but over time people moved in and they never moved out. So this is a little glimpse into the bakery, this mom and pop bakery where people gathered and the study started. And then as the study progressed and people had to leave that place, they sort of regrouped in a few places, including this McDonald's. And there was a little sort of, typical New York City deli, which I called Pete's. So how do people make a home in the city? As I mentioned, sometimes I found that there were sort of counterintuitive ways that people did this. So first, people had to find their public living room. And I kind of jokingly say they loitered because there was this hoopla years and years ago about older adults in Flushing, Queens who were loitering at a McDonald's. And they actually called the police on them. And it was this whole thing. I actually wrote a New York Times op-ed about it. So, the conditions that facilitated people being able to spend a lot of time in a place and sort of facilitated their interaction was that the cost was low. They were able to spend a lot of time there. The location or proximity was close to their homes, and they didn't feel surveilled. People definitely didn't want to go somewhere where they had to leave a lot of tips and they felt it was time limited and they felt unwelcome. People eavesdropped, they people watched, they were nosy, they inserted themselves into conversations, and that's actually how I met people too. I did the same. And they shared a lot of information with each other and gathered kind of intelligence on each other. The group of people I spent time with, though, definitely were not joiners. And I think of that Groucho Marx joke, I don't want to belong to any club that would accept me as one of its members, as kind of capturing the flavor of their interactions. These were not like people who were heavily involved in book clubs or knitting circles. Some of them went to the senior center, but they weren't like the diehard attendees. And while some went to church or spiritual spaces, these were not the regulars there either. A lot of times they didn't even want to really own that they're older, that there's a stigmatized identity. So it wasn't like they were coming together on that basis. But over time, as the looming kind of closure of their first hangout spot, this bakery was closing, they came to recognize some shared vulnerabilities and actually organize. They did start a petition. They made some efforts to try to save the bakery, which did not work. And so I think about it as like maybe they were in a social group in which they all felt solidarity all the time. But I draw on, I'll I'll say, bracket some comments here, some sort of philosophy that looks at maybe if they were in a group, maybe they were a series. Maybe there are some instances in which people can come together facing some shared vulnerabilities and then disperse or come together again. Um, and so they got close with each other in some ways, but also not close. And the discrepancy between the interactions I was observing and how people reported their relationships was really interesting. It posed this puzzle because people who appeared close by these markers that, social network researchers would use, um, they definitely their relationships fulfilled many criteria for closeness, but yet they wouldn't identify each other as friends often. And so I was thinking about their ties a lot and trying to come up with some other way of thinking about this that's not just close or distant, because they could be sort of simultaneously holding these elements in an interaction or social tie. And so, like a rubber band, I sort of thought about them as being elastic. They stretch to accommodate the fluidity and the spontaneous nature of their social relations, but they wanted to keep their options open. So the strength was really in the flexibility. They didn't want to always be each other's emergency contacts. Sometimes they didn't even know each other's names, but they definitely also were able to provide deep support when somebody had a problem, a health crisis, somebody didn't show up. All of a sudden, they're like, where is this person? So, in the interest of time, I won't present a vignette to illustrate that, but the book gets into much more interaction or much more of their interactions and showing these instances when this kind of closeness and distance came about. They gossiped a lot about each other, which I thought was pretty interesting because I had a very naive sort of sense of how they were close at the beginning. And contrary to kind of some of the negative connotations about gossip, it actually revealed a deep sense of intimacy. You have to have a lot of information about a person in order to gossip about them, behind their back. And so in this study, and for these older people who really were needing to feel like they belonged to a group or a place or something, I observed that, in line with other research, this gossip provide them a connection with each other and intimacy. It allowed them to blow off steam. So, even if they couldn't walk to any other coffee shops, they were kind of stuck there together. Gossip helped them diffuse some tension. Of course, there was information sharing that went on, and some social hierarchies were built as well. So the other thing that people were able to do in these third spaces, which was really important for them, especially at this time in their life, was complain. They were able to commiserate with each other. And so, a lot of people would kind of joke, oh, I don't want to go to this place. There's all these older people that were downtrodden, complaining about their aches and pains. There was another older woman and she would say, oh, the people at McDonald's, that's the dementia club. Like, I'm too good for that. But then she would go there and kind of kvetch with them as well. And so in their discussions, they were really able to also consult with each other, get second opinions when there were big healthcare decisions to be made, or they felt mistreated in healthcare spaces, or many people were facing, different situations that came up, especially the people who were the rent controlled and rent stabilized residents with housing. One of the people was dragged down to housing court and they were trying to evict him even though he was paying his rent. It was a terrible situation. So every day he could come and get, kind of pro bono legal recommendations from folks, on and on and on. So, some main takeaways and implications I'd like to draw out from my research. Home is more than four walls, and third places really provide crucial space for social support at many ages, but especially for those facing multiple vulnerabilities in light of increasing diversity and shifting demographics, where people are having, multiple partnerships in their lives. They're not having children, they're living far from family. And so really looking for community connections throughout the whole life course. That social ties outside of weak and strong and the traditional ways we might think about relationships, so these elastic ties, are really an underrecognized and potentially untapped form of social support. And they offer a way to negotiate these competing needs for connection, but also some independence and autonomy. And finally, if we live long enough, we're all going to arrive at this inevitable place in our life, whether it's a temporal place, we live long enough, sort of a physical place, we find places, as our routine shift, cognitive, emotional, kind of a feeling realm, so kind of an internal place. But few are prepared, and there are many administrative burdens, meaning it's really difficult to get through life. And we see now in constant chaos, even getting through to the Social Security office. You can't call, you can't get any, responsiveness. There's lots of different shifts happening in Medicaid and Medicare and all sorts of paperwork. And so it's just really, really difficult. And yet, we kind of find ourselves bewildered often later on. And so if I had, a magic wand and I could just solve so many of our pressing social problems, I'd start with a few key recommendations. Strengthening social infrastructure, so investing in our small businesses and public spaces, fighting commercial gentrification to ease the pain of social eviction that these longtime residents faced, even if many of them still had stable, affordable housing, they were feeling estranged from the area. A substantial investment in deeply affordable, accessible, safe, climate resilient, supportive housing for older adults, but also people of all ages, incomes, and abilities. And finally, the long-term care crisis is really something that, again, we're sort of, surprised when we get to later years, but it's really, been growing and growing. And so bolstering a range of supports for people living in the community, home health care, boosting our care infrastructure, and support for paid and unpaid care workers. So thank you so much. Here is my contact information again if you have any follow-ups. And here is my book, and there's a coupon code. I'm never much of a self-promoter, but if you should feel inclined, you can get it a lot of different places, and that's a code for 30% off. And I will stop here.
Thank you, Tracy. That's lovely. Does anyone have any questions for Tracy? Marion? Marion, you're muted.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I put this in the chat listening to you. I've spent a lot of summers in the Bay Area and really was transformed by some of what I saw, including transportation and seeing people with wheelchairs on the BART. And I had never seen that before. One of the important things I think of both in New York and across the country is more accessible transportation. In New York now is by 2055, the whole city is supposed to be accessible. That's 30 years from now. I've been very involved in getting elevators in the subway, but that's just one part of the larger issue of making transportation easily available for seniors, for everyone, for parents with strollers, for people with luggage, bad backs, bad knees, and transportation was not on your kind of list to discuss. So I was wondering if you'd say a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I really credit the activists in Berkeley, in the 60s, 70s, I mean, who were destroying corners to make sure that they would get curb cuts, because there was no accessibility. So I think I'm not an expert on all of that out there, but I really think that that was probably in concert with a lot of what was going there in the sort of development of BART, which I take all the time out there because I don't drive. I don't have a driver's license. No, that's absolutely a key recommendation in terms of public transportation and making it possible for people of all ages to access. Stairways are difficult, elevators, making sure that they're functioning. I have a sister with multiple disabilities who actually lives in a nursing facility in the Rockaways. She uses a wheelchair, and it's just, even as years before when she was declining, it's extremely isolating. So I thank you for bringing that up, and it's critical, not only to have kind of the infrastructure, but I mean, the thing is, New York, as crumbling as the system is, it's so much It's so much worse in so many parts of the country where you might get a bus an hour. Like when I was living in Albany, New York, they had one bus on a Sunday to the airport, or they still do. It's really horrendous. And so making sure that people have, frequent, reliable transportation, which, obviously, I mean, people don't seem to care about the climate right now, unfortunately, in the current administration. But how are we going to meet any goals of, improving our environment if there's just people are, car bound? So thank you for that. And I'm going to look at the chat comment now.
Yeah. So they were actually busting corners of the sidewalks
Yeah, they
to
would
get
take
them to.
sledgehammers and they were breaking the corners in Berkeley because there were no curb cuts. Curb cuts really, I mean, I'm not an expert on universal design, but curb cuts come out of that movement. And there's a wonderful actually documentary about the disability rights movement, which I think I saw like a trailer for. I haven't seen the whole thing. And there was a camp in upstate New York, and there were all of these activists that would get together, and they were young. And I think there were some from Berkeley too, where they were influenced. I'll try to find that, but it's really great, and I'm very grateful. And like we said, I mean, if it's stroller, I had a hernia surgery at once, and I could like barely walk, and I was like, oh, why are all of these doors so heavy? Not just in public transportation. Why don't we have a button everywhere? So if you're not squeaky and you're not like there with your sledgehammer breaking the corners, it's not going to happen. But
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Marion, you
And
had
the
another.
curb, am I unmuted?
No,
we
you're
can hear
good.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, and the curb cut effect has become a phrase used by disability activists as something that was originally started for people with disabilities is helpful for so many people. That's the universal design, parents with, strollers and people with carts and so on, how many people benefit from what started out as something for the disabled population. Crip Camp is available online, and if you go to the website of Judy Hoyman, it's on her website, and you can kind of Google around and find it.
Great.
Judy Heumann. I don't know how she pronounced her name, Heuman or Mann, but you can find it if you Google.
Great. Thank you, Marion. Okay. Very good, Stacey. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for that lovely little reading and comments and your goals that you were pursuing for the book. It's great study. Okay, we'll move to Caitlin. Caitlin, you have, I believe you have the power. You can begin when you're ready.
Yes, hi everybody. I just want to say also thanks, Stacy. I'm an environmental psychologist, and so the ways in which you're centering place as part of well-being and health and housing, and also as you know, well, we both grew up here at Penn South, and just feel really grateful to see, my mom still lives here, is elder, and as a NORC, the significance of place and in making, all of our lives, I think, kind of more livable. So I really appreciate, I love the way you talk about the kind of living room, which is of kind of public space and these third spaces, and also the policy implications, right, for what you were talking about specifically around gentrification of small businesses, mom and pop shops, and what happens when we see in Chelsea, right? So many of those have disappeared. So, and as the public spaces are being defunded and disinvested, where do folks go, young and old? Because it's really, I think, the younger folks and the older folks who are the users of our public places, right? Well, other people might be at work, but maybe the pandemic changed that with remote work. But anyways, just to say, I really am grateful for your work and your research. So thank you. I just have to, I'm going to share also presentation, and I just have to put it into a way that you can see it. Sorry, why is this? Just give me one moment. So I'm going to share. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar on Red Vienna. So unlike Stacy, I'm not going to be sharing from my research, but instead I visited Vienna in earlier this year, and our friend, for many of us, our friend Tito Delgado, who has been really instrumental in the community land trust movement, felt like this was something to share. So I shared with This Land Is Ours. I'm on the board of that, the advisory board of that community land trust, but also just in this moment to give us a sense of possibility when things feel so hard, especially in housing, and especially now for the ways in which we see the particularly acute struggle with the public housing in our community in Chelsea, as with the proposed, it's not a done deal though, demolition of Fulton Elliott Chelsea. So just play from current slide. I'm trying to do this in a way, sorry, that it allows me to show it while I'm on the Zoom. And it'll just take me one moment. But as I'm doing that, play. Sorry, I thought I had this already. There it is, browse by a window. That's what we want. I can just say that, so here we go. And I can share my screen. So this is probably the image that is the most, I think, and so I'm going to show visuals because I think it's like seeing it, and we all have heard of it. As a New York Times reporter, John and I bumped into at the hearing for the city of Yes, said, oh yeah, going to Vienna is like a mecca, right? For those who are interested in social housing. But I think we hear about it, but we don't always get to see it. So just wanted to give a sense. This image is probably the most well known because it is the Karl Marx Hof, and the Karl Marx Hof is one of the largest housing developments in the world. It's over a kilometer long, and now has 3,000 housing units. It started out with 5,000, but they in fact kind of right-sized housing in order to create that if a family of 4 could have a bigger apartment, they would make that possible, as opposed to the ways in which we often hear right-sizing here in the conversation around public and limited equity housing and social housing, making it smaller. So this is just over the 100th anniversary for social housing. In 2020, Vienna celebrated, and it and to me, what was so interesting in thinking about the development of social housing is that at the same time, actually, I'll just skip forward, that the newly elected Social Democratic Party in Austria was creating this kind of infrastructure of social housing, and they created over 60,000 units in a 10-year period. We in the US were creating an infrastructure for segregation and really for the kind of huge wealth accumulation of racial capitalism of white people, right? And so we all are kind of, I think, familiar with that history, but it feels really important to kind of remember that as we think about this kind of the blueprint and the ways in which these housing policies endure. So, right, so almost 100 years ago, right, was when the redlining and the subsidy in private housing development was taking place, that completely changed, the landscape of the United States. And at the same time, in Red Vienna, there was the development of the social housing infrastructure that, despite the fascists, right, coming to power in the early 1930s and the Nazis, right, still endures today. And so to me, that's interesting. So this is an image that I feel like feels really provocative because it is an image of actually Nazis distributing bread outside the Karl Marx Hof in 1934. And to me, I can't help but think about, right, this moment of fascism in the US, and also the ways in which the food distribution, which is part of the kind of death dealing situation in Palestine, right? And thinking about those kinds of connections. And so so Red Vienna came to an end in 1934 with the fascist-leaning Christian Social Party staging a paramilitary coup. And they had battles between the right-wing nationalists and the socialists, communists, anti-fascists, and labor unions. And many of the workers took refuge in the Karl Marx Hof. And so kind of like what Stacy was talking about, the significance of place is also thinking about where working class communities, right, live, and those places as being really significant. And so so this, again, this is, of course, they lost, right? But again, these places that were put in into the infrastructure that was created endures. And so it endures to today. Over half of Vienna's 2 million residents live in some form of social housing, and average social housing rents are about $700 for a one-bedroom apartment. And so what I want to do is just share, I'm going to share a couple of clips, some images, not take up a lot of time, because I think there's lots of folks here who know a lot about social housing on the call. But then also talk about some of the tools that they have in place that I've learned about. And so in 1918, Vienna's population was about 2 million, the same as it is today, and it was living in very poor living conditions. Many people lived in what they called Basena flats, which were dwellings of just one room and a kitchen, with the kitchen having light and ventilation from a corridor, a single water faucet called a basena, and one toilet per floor. And so these overcrowded conditions were used by bed lodgers, so people who would rent beds for half the day. So we know this continues here, right? I know in New York it continues, and across the US. So sleeping in shifts, so very unhealthy conditions. Also, the kind of epidemics, including cholera and tuberculosis that would spread within these living conditions. And so then a rent cap was introduced. They called it, actually, it translates as a peace rent, to enable the population to afford their dwellings in the post-war period, so between World War I and World War II. And so roomers weren't taken in anymore, which actually made it more difficult for low-income groups to find accommodation. So what was created was a system that of Hofs, which is not a kind of monolithic structure, but was inspired by the Garden City movement. So kind of housing complexes that were around green communal gardens. And so what to me was really interesting was to think about their relationship to each other. I wanted to share with you a video, very short, of about 2.5 minutes from Zoran Mamdani, because that's actually one of where I learned first about Red Vienna when I teach a class called I Heartbreak New York, Gentrification and Urban Change. And so I'm just going to pull that video up. And just this one clip here. So you all can, because it gives a kind of quick, brief history. Here we go. And also because I think we need to hold Mamdani accountable to public and social housing, and really thinking about social housing, not in distinction from public housing, but public housing actually being our greatest resource of social housing that we have here in New York. So
on and about 100 years back in time to take a look at just one example of how an alternative housing model got started in beautiful red Vienna. At the end of the First World War, the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, leaving behind a number of successor states, including modern-day Austria, home to the former imperial capital of Vienna, the fifth largest city in the world. Despite being the seat of an empire, the chaos of the war and decades of neglect had left the working class of Vienna in desperate circumstances. Inflation was rampant, jobs were scarce, social services were non-existent, and hundreds of thousands of people were crammed into decaying tenements where overcrowding, disease, and violence were rampant. So it's no surprise that in 1919, at the first elections ever held in Austria where all adult citizens could vote, the Social Democratic Party swept into power at the municipal level on the promise of dramatic social and economic reform. And they delivered. The new government of Vienna implemented a huge range of services, including public health care and public child care. They built high-quality hospitals, schools, and recreational facilities. But their crowning achievement was an ambitious program of social housing, what Americans call public housing, that began in 1923 and saw 60,000 new apartments constructed in the first year of its existence, built by the government and financed by taxes on the rich. But these weren't the kinds of apartments you might picture when you think of public housing in the United States. Drab high-rises plagued by chronic neglect and underinvestment. Residents could enjoy leafy courtyards, wide open spaces, and plenty of natural light. They had shared laundries, state-of-the-art kitchens, food co-ops, bathhouses, pharmacies, lecture halls, schools, and swimming pools. These apartments were designed to be both beautiful to look at and beautiful to live in, fostering a sense of shared community among the people who lived there. And the best part was that because the city didn't have to worry about making a profit, just about paying off their maintenance costs, these homes were both much nicer and much cheaper than what workers had previously known. In 1926, the average rent in Viennese social housing was about just 4% of a monthly wage. The first 15 years after Austrian independence saw its capital transform from a symbol of urban blight into a beacon of socialist governance. It became known as Red Vienna, after the official color of the socialists who had pioneered these changes. And even though Red Vienna fell in 1934 when the country was seized by fascists, who did what they could to roll back social housing, that commitment to good, cheap housing remained after the Second World War. Today, an astonishing 62% of all city residents live in social housing, with the average monthly rent falling somewhere between $400 and $600 a month, with subsidies for lower income tenants. That is a fraction of what people in America pay. Unlike in the United States, where public housing is treated as a worst-case way to house the very poor, Vienna's social housing residents are extremely diverse. Everyone except the top fifth of the population is eligible to live in social housing. This means there's broad appeal across many segments of society, which creates the foundation for its political popularity. That is how the majority of people in Vienna enjoy something that's considered almost utopian here in New York. Affordable housing that isn't just cheap, but desirable. Housing that isn't just four walls and a roof, but a real home with a sense of stability, safety, and community built in. Now, of course, this is only one example of an alternative framework for housing. And Vienna has not fully removed housing from the domain of the market. Residents still pay part of their earnings in rent to cover operational costs, and a sizable chunk of the population lives in private housing. But it's an actually existing alternative that shows us what a step toward a better world could look like.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there. And I'll put all the links in the chat so you can see the full, but you get a sense. And I feel like, again, we need to think about, this upcoming election, and I'll go over some of the tools. I see the question about fair housing without socialism. And I think that there are tools that we can use here to think about that, that lots of people, I think, are trying to make happen. So let me just zoom. I just show more visuals. So this, when I was there, I wanted to visit social housing, and I visited 10 social housing developments. Actually, the city of Vienna has a map, like a hiking map, and then I did all this research to find different sites. And what was really notable to me, and you can get a sense from the visual here, is kind of how close many of them are. And I happen to be staying in this area called Margetten. And one thing that I think for those of us who are involved with community land trust, one of the things is you need the land. And so Margetten was underdeveloped. It was not in the inner circle of Vienna. And so this land was available. And so I visited, and this is a little Google map I made. And so if anybody goes to Vienna, I can share it with you. And literally the Hofs, you can see Hayden, like they're all within blocks of each other. And so one way to think of it is almost like one of the websites that I read about is almost like an urban archipelago where there's little islands, these like a necklace of these Hofs or communal working class housing that are right next door to each other. And so it was also about kind of changing the public civic life. This is an aerial view that I found online, so you can get a sense of the significance of green space and the ways in which they're built. They're mostly low-rise originally. And so partly the inspiration for the housing came from this kind of sense of we want to build grand social working class housing, but they were trying to match the grandeur of the Habsburg kind of empire architectural style. And so this housing is grand and it's invested in. And so I thought I would share with you some visuals. This is one of the Hofs that is in this area called the Margetten, and they're all kind of along this big boulevard, but they have entrances that you can then walk into. And actually, I think it's kind of can be better to even see the videos. So I want to show you some of the videos that I took, because then you can get a sense of kind of what it looks like.
Hey, let me check in with Katie. Katie, I think has to run. I think it's getting late.
Yes.
Yeah, Katie. So
John, I can come to a future meeting and do a COPA update. It's totally okay. No sweat. The presentations are awesome, so no rush.
Okay. So yeah, if you have to be off in 5 minutes, we can't do that phone call. I guess this is an ongoing operation. You don't expect anything to happen tomorrow. So next month would be just as good for you.
Yeah, no problem at all. We're in a long final months, many months long stretch for COPA. So we can totally do a presentation next in September and take action then too.
Okay. I thought these two things sort of kind of work together kind of well.
I know, I'm
but
sorry. I should have let you
no.
know I have another media at 11, so I just have to prep a little bit for it. But
Sure, I quite understand. No,
I don't mind if you want to do a brief update, Katie. I really don't mind. So whatever works. Yeah.
You want to tease it out a little bit, and then we'll put you on for next month and at the beginning or wherever you'd like to be on the agenda.
yeah, that sounds good. I'll just go super quickly and we won't do any like taking action or anything. We can save that for next time. But the update, I think folks on this call all know about COPA. COPA is a bill that we're fighting for at the city with the city council that would give community land trusts and other mission-driven nonprofits the first right to purchase multifamily buildings when landlords sell. And this is modeled on successful legislation in DC, San Francisco, and is really aimed towards curbing speculation and most importantly, promoting tenant-led and community-led decommodification of housing. So the exciting COPA updates are that we are really close to passing COPA this year. We had a successful hearing in June where the administration reversed their previous course and expressed a willingness to see COPA pass with modifications. So that was a really exciting milestone that was produced by community organizing and efforts by people that have been on this call today, which has been so cool to see. We now have 30 council members co-sponsoring, 150 plus orgs endorsing, and we are in ongoing negotiations and conversations with the council and HPD about passing COPA this year. So I will say next time we'll do like a brief phone bank or email bank, but we're also collecting postcards, and we're doing these tabling events where we, come to organizations, if they have street fairs or other types of event, we come and table and collect postcards. And the postcards have definitely had an effect. They were one of the things I think that pushed Adrienne Adams to really, to call this hearing and take this up. So if any of your orgs have any upcoming events at which you would want to have someone, or you would, you could do it yourselves, table with COPA postcards, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and you are welcome to reach out, and we can support you in, in doing some advocacy around this bill. And I really think we're going to see it pass this year. And if not, under Zohran Mamdani, mayoral administration.
A couple of things, Katie. We've been doing a food and outreach within the public housing. We're also doing a legal clinic. Maybe Katie, you might want to give her some dates, and also another thing. Our Communities Together Festival is going to be on the 21st of September, and that's on 40th Street between 6th and Broadway. So you might want to hold that date. I'd love to have you there as a tabler and a speaker. So you can gather a couple of troops with you and have some space there for your discussion.
Excellent. I'm holding it in my calendar right now. That's the event that Alex and I went to last year together.
Yes.
Oh, that was awesome. Yes, I remember. Okay. I would love to do that. And please, John, let's just talk offline about the legal clinic and other events. I think it would be great to do some COPA outreach there. So
Right. We've been
I'm
doing it on
sorry,
a
guys, that
Sunday.
I have to sort of hop so unceremoniously, but I've been fascinated by these presentations today and always hear so many interesting things when I come to these meetings. So thank you, John and Alex and everybody. And we'll be in touch about COPA.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Stacy, you too, if you'd like to be there at a table, with your books and so forth, keep that date in mind. And if anybody else has any interest in our event come September 21st, we take up the whole block with music and discussions about health, housing, food, homelessness, rent issues. We even had some discussions about we had an anti-war group, and I was proud to have them there when everybody was not saying too much. They were very outspoken. And if anybody doesn't realize the connection from what's going on here to there, I'll be glad to sit with you.
John, there's 11 minutes left if you want to end at 11.
Yeah. Katie, did you want to, Caitlin, did you want to kind of round that up? Are you good?
I could just share a couple of visuals and then I'll share a couple of tools. Is that okay?
We got 9 minutes basically. You want to go to the tools, or do you think you can? And then we got a little. Feel free.
Let me just show, is it okay if I just show a couple of videos so you
Yeah,
can just see
sure.
what it is?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I'll do it quick. Here's one. This is Hayden Hoff. So you can just see built after World War I. And actually, I'll just show you, this is a big courtyard. And then here's a kindergarten. I'm going backwards. Okay. That's just one. I'm going to share with you another. I think the significant, so all of the social housing in Red Vienna was developed with kindergarten. Some of them had collective kitchens. There was an architect who also designed what was considered one of the kind of first functional kitchens the way that we know it today, who designed the interior design, Margaret Lehosky, and it's called the Frankfurt Kitchen. So it was these kind of total living environments, including gyms, playgrounds, clinics, libraries, classrooms, music recital facilities. So for me, it was really inspiring to get to see some of these visuals. And so I wanted to, I don't want to run out of time. Let's see. Here's another, there's one in particular I want to, because it's so grand, that if you see it, it's just kind of to think about the possibilities and also the kind of investment, oh, here we go, in housing. So here. Oh, here, I'm gonna just bring it back so you can see the beginning of it. It has a fountain. This is the Rumenhof, and all of the details. This actually had that kind of a training for women around kind of aesthetics, massage, so kind of workforce development as we know it. I guess you get the sense. I don't want to, I know that we were running out of time.
The green spaces are interesting. The way, when you showed the overview, it was like on the interior of the building, sort of, and it led to other courtyards. And it kind of reminds me, kind of highlights the idea of what the Chelsea public housing, the green spaces are kind of central and important, and
Yeah,
and they
exactly.
want to destroy it.
Yeah, the green spaces are so important, and they're all public. So even though you walk in, they were public, and so they were the parks. There were no parks there in those neighborhoods, and so these were the public parks, and they were also communal spaces. I think about social and political life, right? How people organize and come together. These were also those spaces. So this is the Karl Marx Hof. You can see the amount of green space. And when I was there, I mean, it was so tremendously, so huge. I was so struck by, okay, I have way too many visuals, but about how big those spaces were. So this is the Karl Marx Hof, so you can see the inside of the space.
Yeah, it's a nice quality of life. Thanks, Caitlin. This is very nice.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to show you another space, but this you see color. Okay. I'm going to stop. So the tools, I put a link to the chat with the tools, and so there's a number of different tools that are used, and all of those are on on their website, which I put in the chat. But I think critically, 5% of everybody's income tax, 0.5%, goes into this housing fund. So everybody is taxed for this. In order to, and most of the funding goes to infrastructure rather to individual housing vouchers. And this is used for both construction and refurbishment. And so I think a lot of folks probably read the article in the New York Times that came out a few years ago. I also put that in the chat. But another essential part of their housing tools is what they call limited profit construction and housing associations. And so what this means is that those who are developers can only charge the amount of rent that it costs. So they have to stay true to costs rather than making profit, or they make a little bit of profit. And this is actually the bulk of the social housing that's been produced over many years. I have so much information, but I know we're out of time. Maybe it's better just to kind of have conversation about it. And I can share more of what I learned if folks are interested.
Yeah, seems like this discussion alone, just the makeup is a good is another whole discussion worthwhile exploring. You see, I guess I've always heard about Vienna, and I've seen read about it and so forth, and I feel like we should learn from what they're doing and see how we can implement some of their processes and plan. And is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I definitely, to inspire folks, I'm trying to put some of the information about some of the tools in the chat. So, so you have an understanding of, how this is something that's possible. There's like COPA, right? There's TOPA, there's the Stock Transfer Act. There's lots of ways that we actually could, I think, through policy, create more housing. Rob, raised a question, he's off the call now, about where do we get the land? And that is something that maybe Alex could also speak to, if we're going to create more, new housing. But I think I would say, look at the housing that we have, over 335 campuses. It's actually very parallel New York's public housing history to what was to the infrastructure. It was around 300 campuses, right? That was built they made 60,000 units originally. And so thinking about this, the tools for maintenance and for keeping people, that we have this incredible infrastructure that we need, that's actually, I would say, sacred, it's sacred housing land that we need to invest in. And so how to take that funding and put them into that already existing housing, as well as create more housing. And in the community land trust movement, Alex, again, I think could probably talk to this from Nicely's perspective, but they're looking at parking lots at, for example, churches that are now, donating their land, right? So public and private that can then be used and through COPA purchased, right, by community organizations to create social housing. So yeah, that's all.
Luana and Rob and pointed out, and Damu had pointed out, Luana says Elliott Chelsea houses had all those things before the divestment. Communal spaces for pottery classes, youth groups, arts and recreation spaces, tutorial center, communal laundry room, and social workers. See, we see that. We see the remnants of it. We see the divestment happen. And I think there was some good intentions when they built it, but they started deconstructing it almost not too long afterwards. And more valuable. NYCHA can learn from this. Well, like Luana pointed out, it was there, and maybe we can bring that back somehow. And Rob says, are we too late with these ideas? I would ask, how do you acquire land in New York City when the market dictates land availability? And that's why it's extremely important that we hang on to this public housing. Okay, we got to fight like the devil because they're looking to steal the land. They're looking to grab it. So it's very important we hang on to that, because land is limited, and it's going to be impossible, I think, to get land under this environment, under the capitalist environment, under our economic system. And here's our Chelsea Public Housing Legal Defense Fund. And you guys you got the link in there, I'm sure, right? And this, we just put this up and only last week, and we haven't really done a heavy marketing on it, but we're over 11,000, so it shows promise. So if everybody can send this out on your links to your folks, to your friends, family, and help build that amount up, because we want to hire. It's just strictly for legal defense, and it's for right now. It's for the seniors. The seniors are in the crosshairs of the developers. Okay, they're pushing them out first. And anybody want to add to that? Renee, I saw Renee. Is she here?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
also working on the two buildings at Fulton Street on 19th Street where the park's in front of, right next to Razzo and Sons. So it's getting those tenants out will allow for demolition to begin. The 90 days takes place on about October 26th. And then after that, we have to start fighting harder. So
Yeah.
they want them out. Because if they get them out, they can demolish. You can't demolish a building with people in there and the electricity on.
Yeah, they've already started moving them out.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add to that? Caitlin, you've been over there with us.
Yeah, I will just say, just like, this fight for Elliott, Chelsea, Fulton, that, Renee is really at, the center of holding with, as the tenant association president of Elliott, Chelsea, is about this place, and it's so much bigger, right? It's about all of NYCHA. Like, we need everybody to come on board and support and get behind and join this struggle, right? Because that is how we have to hold on to this public land, this housing, and be in solidarity with the people who are, at risk of losing their homes, which is not only the folks in Chelsea, but I think we're next, right? So I'm lucky enough to also live in social housing and want to reframe, right, social housing. Not, there's a lot of people, Renee, you talk about this, right, who focus on social housing, community land trust. We need to understand public housing is our most valuable asset of social housing. And everybody in the CLT movement needs to join and get behind this fight with public housing. So that's what
Do you want to talk about the actions we're doing? I think Sunday, right? We've got another food distribution on Sunday. And what else is going on? You're setting up a legal clinic, right, Caitlin? Renee, you're
I believe this Sunday we'll be also doing a legal clinic, talking with people, letting them know their rights. We're also working on setting up another one with NILAG at the same time. We have to get in contact with them, make sure it can be done. The more people know, the more education, the better. But what I also want to say is this is about public housing, but it's about all housing. I think we frequently see on the news that we are seeing older people, older tenants, people in rent stabilized, rent control housing are going through the same issues that NYCHA are. It's no different. We are the most long-standing tenants, and to get us out means that they can start doing this anywhere. It's not like there aren't landlords who owns whole blocks of buildings. Put them all in one building, demolish everything. This is going to be used as the standard. And frankly, if they get past us, and we don't think they will, they'll start using this everywhere else. Don't think it's not about you. They're after everything.
Yeah. Well, they actually have started. Remember, they started in Chicago, then they went to Florida and Rockaway. I think that was what had happened. Now in New York, they've always been working on New York, of course, but Chicago was their first successful takeover, basically.
I just wanted to add too, the rates of older people going into homelessness for the first time are skyrocketing too, all over the country. And so again, if you're in, a rent stabilized situation and your landlord wants you out here, there you go. And I speak from experience. My ex-husband grew up on the Lower East Side. His parents were the super of the building. They threw them out in lightning fast time. This was in 2006, and they were in their 60s, so it's just brutal. They do not care. So thank you, Renee, for just emphasizing that point.
Yeah, that's such a good point. They really don't care. Luana, I see your hand
Thank you,
up.
John. I want to thank you. This was a really good. I'm not feeling good today, so that's why I'm up.
Uh,
But I just want to say thank you to all of the people that were on call today, Caitlin and Stacy. As I think of them, the powers that be taking advantage of the elderly first and foremost, right? And I call it elder abuse. Really, it's a civil and a human rights violation. One of the things that Stacy, as you were speaking, excuse me, I couldn't really get to you. But one of the things that you spoke about reminded me before the removal of a property here at Penn South, there was a McDonald's, and the elders used to gather in the McDonald's every day. And as you were saying, how the cost was relatively cheap, and they could get together and talk about each other and talk about things and just communicate and just gather together. They no longer had that space to do that, right? And most of the new spaces are sort of like, preppy kind of spaces where the elderly are not really welcome, right? And they didn't really kick them out of there. They let them stay there all day. And you would go there and you would see the elders there and you would say hi or whatever. After the McDonald's closed, if we haven't when we did see the elders that used to frequent the McDonald's, they were more frail. They were less talkative. The things that happened to them because they lost that sense of community in that little McDonald's, right? It was very impactful. So when you think about the community of the seniors that are being, forced to move to vacate their property, and you think about the community that they have sustained during the time they lived there, you think about the effects of not having that community in place. What will it do to them at the, afterwards, right? So many of the ones that used to go to McDonald's have died. They have looked for a place to stay. They, hung out on the street. So it's a really serious issue. It's not only us that's being affected, or the residents of the projects, but it is the community sense of gathering together and helping one another make it through each day, right? So yeah, that's just, so I thank you both. Thank you all, Rob, too, for everything that you've shown us today and shared with us. Thank you for your experiences and your talents. Appreciate it.
yeah, that's very nice sentiment, Luana, as always. Anyway.
John, for those who don't know, on June 16th, MSCC, that's all of us here, won the 2025 Good Neighbor Award from Goddard Riverside. The acceptance speech was from John Mudd, very emotional. I think you probably skipped that to be humble, or just because the agenda today was so packed. But just so you know, a video is going to come out about that, not to, brag, but to emphasize that we are creative. For example, bringing fresh organic greens to seniors to draw them in to and let them know what the heck's going on. So that video is going to be paired with the Farm Initiatives video, so that it's not this like bragging, oh, we won an award. So that is coming soon, just so you know.
Thank you, Alex. Alex is doing some great work on the videos. If you haven't noticed them, go to our YouTube. Very appreciated. I mean, we're strapped. We're a nonprofit. We're working hard, all of us. It's hard, so we really have to coalesce and really be very pointed, and that's where our power is. So the more, the merrier in these struggles. And Caitlin, did you want to say?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought it was a pause. I think I was just thinking about the city of yes, also, just for all of us to really be conscious of that, because actually Zoran Mamdani signed on to it, and I feel like it's very destructive, of our city. And just that's why, I mean, this video that he created that I started with was from years ago, but we need to make sure that this is front and center. I feel like whatever we can do to hold him accountable to, because if we're looking to him for some kind of, possibility, which I think he's the only possibility, which is ridiculous. I mean, no, I mean, I believe in people power. We are the future, and it's all of us who actually make, him and our other politicians accountable. But yeah, I feel like this is such a pivotal moment. So just like when Red Vienna came in, it was like, could be transformative if folks are organized. And so I really feel like this fight to save Fulton, Elliott, Chelsea from demolition is, that's the heart, is like, at least in our community, to save our community, actually, right? Like what Renee was saying, it's like all of us, we have to hold that. This is all of our fight. So, and to save our city. Yeah.
I feel like it's the front lines of the battle. We lose this, we're in really deep trouble. Not that we aren't now, but I'm serious. If we lose this battle, I really believe we'll be, I don't know, maybe move to Vienna. But in any case, I'll wrap up with two things. Yeah, City of Yes, we were a plaintiff on the City of Yes. It's looking good. Jack did a nice job litigating it. The other side was arguing at different points, and maybe we can give a recap of that at our next meeting. Caitlin, I know you wrote down a lot of notes, and with that, anybody who wants to help with the event on the 21st, the Communities Together, I need it. I'm behind now. Public housing has been really kind of a heavy lift here for trying to coalesce, but it's working. It's in its infancy stages. All the little community committees. We've formed several committees to really do a deep focus, but it takes a little work for it to gel and be really smooth. But I think we're going in the right direction. But again, it's a little late, and I'm hoping we win this battle. So anybody who wants to help on that issue, help on the Communities Together issue, or be involved with the council in any other way, the farming projects, even volunteering, temporary, we're open. So we appreciate you all, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Any last words?
Quick question for Caitlin. Caitlin, when you said Zoran Mamdani, or maybe I misheard, I heard you say that he signed on. So what is that referring to? Did he cozy up to somebody who was like, because he's on the state? So I'm confused.
Thank you, Alex. I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, I feel like I might mix up the terms, but
He endorsed,
what?
right? He endorsed the.
There was I think the amicus brief from the city. They had people sign on to it to endorse, and he did. Brad Lander did. Yeah.
Wow.
I'll try and get him in this space maybe next month. Try and get him in the space, and we can reach out to. I have his schedulers. I don't know if anybody else has a really closer ties, but I've talked to him a few times. I talked to his scheduler, so I'll try and get him in this space. Maybe we can have a discussion here with him, and offer our endorsement if he can understand our position on public housing. He did have a meeting with the public housing folks. I think he was very concise with his answers. And so I think we should, if he would take it, give him some space here. Yeah, we can ask, right? Okay.
John, are you still recording?
Yes. I'll
okay.
stop now.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, I'm done. The recording's off.
Well, I wanted to piggyback on Caitlin's presentation of Red Vienna. So I was kind of shocked to hear the 3,000 number in Karl Marx Hof, because in Singapore, where I was born, the biggest social housing has 1,800 people. And so, yeah, that was shocking to hear such a large number. I don't know the scale of Vienna. I don't know how big it is, like vis-a-vis New York City size, but I just want to say the series on Amazon called Waterfront Cities of the World, it does not specifically talk about social housing, but it does touch on social housing wherever it exists. So Singapore is season 2, episode 7. They do talk about Singapore's social housing where people pay roughly 20%. It's not a hard
I
codified
should have
20.
taped this, Alex. I should have taped this, what you're saying. I thought you wanted me to shut it off.
No. I mean, I thought I was going to say something semi-private or controversial, but anyway, Amazon Prime. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Waterfront Cities of the World. Season 2, episode 7 is about Singapore's social housing, and it's funny because my mom, she worked in the HPD equivalent of in Singapore. It's not called HPD over there, it's called HDB. And so she sees everything through a housing lens. And, when she first visited my apartment here, she was like, oh my God, New York City needs to build more. I don't live in social housing, just so you know. But she says, New York City needs to build more of this kind of housing that I live in, which is unfortunately for-profit housing, 421A. But I said, yeah, Mom, they do need to build more housing. But then I got into it with her and she was like, oh, okay. But yeah, that video series is not about social housing, but it does touch on social housing.
Okay, alrighty.
I think it's still being recorded, actually.
No. Oh, wow.
The top of my
Maybe
screen.
Good, I didn't say anything controversial.
I think the computer was off. I think what it was? It's the YouTube. So you're on YouTube. Hey.
Can I say one other thing? I guess I just feel like this is, I didn't say this earlier, but in relation to Red Vienna and this particular moment where it's like fascism and capitalism and social, is that in the 1930s, the US actually did consider social housing, but instead decided, and Richard Rothstein writes about this and others, right, the US government was very much focused on trying to get people to focus kind of on their individual private property. And so that's why there was this huge push towards private property ownership. I mean, it was, of course, already in our Constitution and already was part of the kind of wealth accumulation of white supremacy in the United States. But I think that there was this moment, right? And so then when the FHA created the mortgage system, right, it was about individuals just focusing on themselves, like individualizing, right? And at the same time, that's when also public housing was first developed. And it was always racialized, right? So I think when we think about capitalism, we're always thinking about racial capitalism and how that was also in mind with, this was at, 1919, this is when the Bolshevik Revolution was, and it was very much about stopping, the communists and the socialists from organizing working class communities. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, because I think it is, again, like thinking much bigger around how we all need to, come together around this.
Excellent. I'm going to